right, people, today's the long-awaited only 3 trap exercises you need to build bigger traps and get an overall thicker back. Let's get straight into it. All right, this is better. Now, before we jump into the exercises, let's first understand the anatomy of the traps. Now, the traps pretty much originate at the base of the back of your neck and insert in the clavicle slash acromion slash scapula of the spine, basically like the back of your shoulder area. Now, there are 3 divisions of the traps. Firstly, the upper traps, which is essentially the higher portion at the back of your neck that is also visible from the front. This is the portion that people usually think of when they think of the trap muscle. And the second portion is the mid traps. Now, they sit just below the upper traps and they are not visible from the front, but this is the portion people usually think of when they think of back thickness. And then lastly, we have the lower traps, which in the name sit even further below the mid traps. Now, unlike the mid traps, which basically run side to side, the lower traps are more of a V shape, which will impact the exercise choices in order to bias them, which we will get into further. And it is based off that slight differing orientation of each part of the traps where we can actually bias one part of the traps over the other. So with that understanding, let's get into the first exercise. So the first exercise is going to be the cable shrug done on a set of Faraway cables. Now, most of you guys are familiar with the traditional free weight shrug using dumbbells or barbells, but there is a specific reason why I'm doing a cable shrug on a set of Faraway cables. Now, on a free weight shrug like this, the line of resistance is going to be exactly vertical because on pretty much any free weight exercise, we're bound by gravity. However, if you look at the orientation of the upper traps, they pretty much run almost horizontal. Maybe a little bit of a slant at the top over here, but they're definitely not vertically aligned. In fact, if we think about the natural range of motion of a shrug, it's not just purely upwards. It's more up and then you kind of rotate inwards a little bit, right? It's not just it's more like Now, this is all to say that with a free weight shrug, we might not be training the upper traps as best as we can compared to other variations, which is where this cable shrug variation with the Faraway cables comes in handy. Now, I first saw this exercise done by Menno Henselman, so credit to him for at least putting it on my radar. But the idea is by using a set of Faraway cables, we're able to align the resistance with the orientation of the upper traps, which might make it a better variation. Now, I say might because there is some evidence showing that doing an upper trap exercise with the arm slightly abducted, meaning far away from your body and not to your side, might be better for actually training the upper traps. And anecdotally speaking, I do feel like it feels more natural to be doing a shrug with our arms wide apart like this. Like, I feel like I'm able to better shorten at the top. Now, to set this movement, make sure you have the cables set to the lowest setting. And what I'm gonna do is literally grab one handle and then walk over to the other side and grab the other handle. I'm gonna try to center myself. If you have a mirror in front of you, that's gonna be a really easy way to do so. And then next, I'm actually gonna take a slight step back so that I'm slightly behind the cable. I highly recommend that you lean forward slightly in order to align the movement better with the upper trap. Now from here, I simply focus on shrugging up and getting my shoulders to touch my ears. That's at least what I should be thinking in my head right now. Now, another tip is when you're doing the shrug, make sure that you're keeping your neck forward like this into flexion rather than keeping your head back. This is gonna allow you to keep your neck safe, as well as being in a stronger position to do the shrug for the upper traps. Now, after you're done with the concentric, you wanna allow your shoulders to come back down and your shoulder blades to spread apart as wide as you can in order to get a good stretch on the upper traps. So I don't want just like you going like this. I wanna actually allow the traps to spread before going to my next rep. So that was the first movement. Now I guarantee if you've never trained the upper traps like this, I think you're gonna like this movement. I think you're really gonna feel it. And also, if you want more personal guidance to get into your fitness goals, I highly recommend you apply to my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program if you're serious about hitting your fitness goals. Because I basically give you a full workout program, give you advice on nutrition, you'll send in weekly check-ins, and you'll have the ability to get all your questions answered. So with that said, if you're interested, apply in the link in the description. Let's get back to the video and the second exercise. All right, move on to the second exercise, and that's gonna be a chest-supported isolateral machine row. Now here we're gonna be biasing the mid-traps, but also the lower portions of the upper traps. Now a good alternative if you don't have access to this machine is a chest-supported T-bar row. Now the idea here is essentially you just wanna be pulling with flared elbows, and I will get into that later. Now I personally opt to use an isolateral variation because each limb is responsible for its own weight, which is generally will make the movement feel a little bit more ergonomic, but also if you tend to have a side-to-side muscle imbalance, opting for an isolateral exercise is probably gonna be a better choice if you wanna minimize that muscle imbalance. Now I also recommend this machine because of the chest support. Now in general, a chest supported row is going to be a more stable variation compared to a non-chest supported row. And in general, the more stable an exercise is, the easier time you'll have being able to train the exercise all the way to failure without your form breaking down. Now, while the first movement was more focused on scapular elevation, this one we're going to be focusing on scapular retraction, meaning the act of squeezing your shoulder blades back. Now, to set up this movement, I first recommend setting a seat height so that your arms are perpendicular to gravity. But me personally, I just like standing instead of sitting. Now, moving on to the grip. So ideally, you want to take this pronated grip handle up here rather than the ones down here. The reason being is with a pronated grip handle, naturally we're going to be pulling with more elbow flare. And what this allows us to do is essentially have an easier time squeezing our shoulder blades back on the movement compared to if our arms are down here where we're going to be biasing more of the lats. Right, so we take this pronated grip handle. Now, allow your shoulder blades to spread apart on the movement so that you're getting a good stretch on the mid-traps. And afterwards, when you pull your arms back, make sure you're also squeezing your shoulder blades back. Pretend you're trying to like hold a penny between your shoulder blades. So you squeeze your shoulder blades back, and as your arms come back down, make sure you're not holding that squeeze. Allow your shoulder blades to actually come apart into protraction. That act of protraction and retraction is a part of the range of motion for the mid-traps. And thus, you don't want to just like hold your shoulder blades back. No, you want to allow that natural movement to occur. Now, a common complaint that a lot of people have on a chest supported row is that you can kind of like lose your breath sometimes. It's not the most comfortable thing. So I also highly recommend bracing your core. Now, the best way to do this during the set is instead of breathing out on the concentric, so going, I actually recommend breathing in between reps. So basically adopting more of a powerlifting style breathing pattern that a lot of people do on bench press, squat, that sort of thing, which will look like this. So you take a deep breath in, you hold your breath throughout the entire duration of the set. I'm still holding my breath in, and it's not until you actually finish the rep that you actually breathe out and take another breath in. And honestly, that's pretty much how you do a trap-focused row. Just make sure you're pulling with a lot of elbow flare and allow your shoulder blades to protract as well as retract. Let's move on to the third exercise. And real quick, a common question I get is what supplements do I actually recommend? And my answer is always, you don't necessarily need any supplements, but two supplements that I would recommend if you're trying to maximize muscle growth is one, protein powder, and two, creatine. Now with protein powder, it's a very convenient way to try to hit your protein intake as well as being a good alternative for sweets. And creatine has been proven to show muscular endurance benefits. So you're probably gonna be able to get like 1 or 2 more reps being on creatine. At least 4 out of 5 of y'all will. Now in terms of what brand I personally recommend, I highly recommend MyProtein. Not MyProtein, but brand MyProtein. I've been working with them for over a year at this point. I've actually taken their protein powder all the way back since high school. Now if you want an affordable option, Impact Whey Concentrate. That's pretty much all you need. It's just protein powder. But if you don't like shakes or milky things and you're currently cutting, then I highly recommend their Clear Whey line. Pretty much tastes like juice. It's meant to be taken with water, so it's like Kool-Aid and it's very low in calories. And then in terms of creatine, you can simply take creatine monohydrate. You don't need anything fancy. As a matter of fact, I actually recommend you take creatine monohydrate over other variations because creatine monohydrate is the most studied variation. With that said, code TylerPath. Let's get back to the video. All right, so moving on to the third and final exercise, we have a cable Y rings. Now this is gonna be the lower traps focused exercise, of course. And the unique thing about the lower traps is that they're oriented not side to side, but like a V, which basically means that the lower traps not only does scapular retraction, but also scapular depression, meaning it also brings down these shoulder blades. And thus, to best bias the lower traps, a Y raise movement pattern is gonna be a better fit. Now the Y raise is also often considered a side delt exercise, which is true. But a way to theoretically try to bias more of the lower traps over the side delt is to pretty much do the opposite of what I usually recommend on a side delt exercise, and that is you initiate the movement by thinking about squeezing the shoulder blades back as you raise your arm. So instead of trying to stay wide, like I always say on a side delt exercise, like no, you don't want to stay wide. You actually want to think about bringing your arms back first so you track your scapula, and then finish the movement. And then to illustrate this point, instead of doing a side delt focused Y raise, we'll look something like this, where as you see, I'm not really retracting my shoulder blades back or anything. I'm not squeezing them back. In order to bias lower traps, we actually want to squeeze them back. So what we're going to do instead is initiate the movement by squeezing our shoulder blades back, and then finish the range of motion of the movement. And on the way back down, we once again want to protract our shoulder blades, spread them apart before beginning the next rep, where we do pretty much the same. So it's the difference between this and this. Those were the only 3 trap exercises you need to build well-rounded traps and an overall thicker back. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please leave a like on my page if you enjoyed this. Hit subscribe to level up your physique, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.